Hey, what's up? How's everybody doing? My name is Jennifer, and I am going to teach this class today. Here's my big face twice. Welcome to all of you who are here watching live, and those of you who are watching the replay. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your attention and interest in this work that I do. A little bit about me: I'm a feminist witch, astrologer, a tarot reader, a collective guide, and a creator. I'm passionate about self-awareness, revolution, trauma shadow work, equality, sovereignty, radical self-love. I was born and I live in the Pacific Northwest, that I now recognize as stolen land of the Salish people. And I live with my bearded Leo husband, my Libra man-child son, who's 17 today, crazy stuff, and my wildling Taurus daughter. So my three astro keys: I am a Gemini rising, curious and contemplative. I'm a Virgo sun, means healthy systems analysis, emphasis on the analysis and do-overs. And I have a Leo moon, so I love to be the center of attention. My Virgo sun hates this. I have clearly gotten over that. So the synergy is I'm honest and I lead with my heart best I can. I just love being human. So I'm always here for a good human existence, as it were. So what are we here for? You know, I'm all about healing with astrology. So what I recognized from years of studying astrology is that I was healing myself along the way. Now, that's not to say that it replaces therapy or anything that you might also do to heal yourself from your experiences of trauma or just being in the patriarchy, which I think is traumatic. But astrology has been there for me when I needed clarity, validation, and as I learned to read my chart and the charts of my friends and family and loved ones, it deepened my love for them. It deepened my experience of humanity, and it helped me to realize that I have a much greater capacity to be all of the things than just the basic sun sign astrology or even moon sign astrology would have you believe. So, you know, I believe that your natal chart is a map to all of your cycles and your patterns, and that while you wouldn't want to necessarily track them so diligently, right, like perfectly, that's what my Virgo mind wants to do, is do everything perfectly. But if you are able to just feel into and observe yourself through the lens of astrology, that you can actually heal some of the things that you might struggle with on a day-to-day basis and in a larger sense. So I created the Astrologic Lab last year during the pandemic, around Gemini season. And, you know, it's a monthly astrological subscription. If you want to come and learn with me month to month, we do classes 2 to 3, sometimes 4 times a month. We focus on the sun sign. Right now, we just moved the sun moved into Libra a couple of days ago. And so we are embracing the Libra archetype this month. The new download material goes out on Sunday. So if you want to start with us, you can get that going. You can go to paintedgoddess.com and check it out. We do all sorts of cycle reflections, and I basically teach you astrology through the lens of your own natal chart. So we're always anchoring it back to your self-reflection and self-knowledge. I also am a nerd for worksheets, and so everything is worksheets. You need a binder for this. Like, you got to print some shit and then you got to like doodle, and that's how you learn, is through literal embodiment practices. All right, membership benefits. We're gonna get through this because I gotta do my sales pitch, because I'm a fucking business lady and I'm not ashamed. So thank you. Membership benefits, monthly content. I put out planetary books with symbols and all sorts of like reflection opportunities. There's one for every planet so far. We're working on the asteroids. I do archetype reflections. We do monthly live classes and group calls. There's a growing video library of those group calls. I also record some content on my own so that you can kind of watch it as you like. They're quicker and more succinct videos. We also have a mighty network where you can connect with other witches who are learning this astrological content and reflect, which is kind of cool because when you use tags and put things in there, you can actually like go back and see like, what have you been saying? So if you use that as a reflection place to journal, you can go through and see all of the things that you've put. Plus, if you look at specific planets or houses or placements and search those terms, sometimes other people in the lab have also made those ruminations in there, and you get a bigger sense of what astrology actually means because it's collective. And that's also a huge piece of my work that everything working towards collective. You know, we're in the Aquarian age, we're moving towards collective care in a really radical way. So this is part of the practice of how I run my business and my programs. So you also get a Zodiac Elementary workbook pages for astrological symbol education. In fact, my daughter's going to start doing these, so stay tuned for the reels on that. She's like super into drawing symbols, so I'm super excited about that as well. There is a lunar alignment workbook, so working with the moon. It's one of the major practices that brought me to talk about cycle work in this radical way. And I think that the moon, because it goes through every season, you know, it goes through every sign every month, whereas the sun does it once a year, right? There's so much opportunity to work with your emotional landscape through the moon. Highly recommend it. I also include all of the retrograde workbooks. So we did 3 of them this year. You can go back and reflect. There's really never a bad time to go back and reflect on transits as they come. Sometimes you don't see them until you have some space, right? It's good to get data in the moment and say, well, what's happening right now? How do I feel right now? What's the deal right now? But when you have some space, sometimes that's when the integration actually happens. And those 3 workbooks are also just for sale on my website if you want to go grab them on their own and not join. All astrological archives, everything that I make for the lab is in the archives. There's core module and resource libraries, and it has a growing and always being edited do-over, as it were, as my Virgo sun loves. And then you also, you know, you get to connect with a coven of badass witches to learn with. And some of my members are here in this class live. Shout out to you. I love you guys so fucking much. And if you're watching the replay and you're in the lab, you're amazing. Thank you for doing this work and showing up for everyone. We all benefit from you being here. All right. So if you are interested, but you want to just kind of like dip your toes in, I'm doing a free workshop. There's a 12-house webinar. You can map your solar harvest cycle and do the work of that. And I show you how to do it. You just go to this link, bit.ly/Astrologic Lab, and it'll take you to a special page on my website that's hidden, and you can watch the workshop, do that work, and then it'll send you a series of emails, of course, to let you know that you definitely should come join the lab. So if you want to check that out, go and check that out. All right. Done with that. Let's check in with how we got 9 people on the call. Thank you for being here. I did put in the chat, if you want to ask questions, please feel free to ask questions. I will address them at the end of the class, and we'll go down the line. So if there's something that comes up for you, try and be as specific as possible so I know what you're talking about. But if you don't know terms and you can't ask the perfect question, please just show up as you are and ask the question, and we'll do the best we can. I'll ask you to clarify if needed. So, all right. So why work with Mercury? Okay, Mercury's about to go retrograde. You've probably heard a billion things about it. And if you follow any astrologers or memes or whatever, there's just there's a lot of snark, of course, which makes sense because Mercury is nothing if not the trickster snark energy at its best, right? I mean, it is quick wit, it is razor sharp tongue, and it communicates clearly with like just so much focus. And so Mercury helps us to really start to channel in messages that come from the universe. You know, when we talk about Mercury's mythology, we can recognize that he was the god of, you know, that would go around and talk to all the other gods and messenger all of the messages across all of the gods, right? So, and if you notice the transit, Mercury moves very quickly and meets up with everyone, you know, the whole host throughout the year. We'll go visit, you know, Mercury visits Uranus and Saturn and Pluto and Venus and Mars and Neptune and the sun, right? And during Mercury retrogrades, when Mercury moves back, is when we also get a Mercury Sun conjunction. More about that later, but it's a huge deal in terms of getting yourself clarity of mind and that kind of thing. All of this energy is to say that you can work with this energy. So, you know, I say goddess, I'm really working towards non-binary language. I think that it's a little outdated, and that we all have access to the polarity of masculine, feminine, and honestly, Libra energy, where the Mercury is retrograding this month, is seriously highlighting how we can actually open up to the spectrum that is within us of all of the polarities that we have, you know, always traditionally named having to do with gender, right? We're kind of obliterating some of that. So your work may have more to do with that than others. You may not have ever thought about that at all. But when we look at the balance of things, I think that there's a lot of space for us to really go within and understand not just how our capacity can grow on the spectrum of human experience, but we can give ourselves permission to do more. And Libra wants balance that looks like harmony, right? It doesn't want singularity. It wants biodiversity and harmony. It's a chorus, it's an orchestra. Okay, it's not just one note. So when we look at Mercury retrogrades though too, it's a time to pay attention. It's a time to slow down. It's looking at the way we spend the day, right? It's looking at daily quick turn activities. How do we communicate with others? What are our thoughts telling us in what's our mental health? What are the qualities of our thoughts in our brain? What is it that we think often of, right? If you start to pay attention to those 60,000 or whatever thoughts a day, you'll notice perhaps a tone of voice, a quality of the thoughts, right? Are they reaching into the future? Are they reaching into the past? You know, I use a lot of esoteric and philosophical texts to kind of guide my work. This particularly was definitely inspired by Eckhart Tolle's work and Brené Brown's work, as well as Tara Brach. You know, Buddhist kinds of philosophy that also dabble in life coaching, to some degree, managing your mind, Brooke Castillo. So I have a list of resources at the end of the workbook if you purchase it, and you're, you know, very encouraged, especially during Mercury retrograde, to dig into your brain, how it works, where your programs are. Okay, so Mercury wants us to contemplate our truth and tell that truth to others through communication. Now, of course, it's also very important that we understand our truth, which is what we started with this year. Okay, we had Mercury retrogrades in all air signs this year. In January, February, we had it in Aquarius. Okay, and the Aquarius was defining truth, pure truth, no drama, no emotion. Okay, it wasn't even really thinking too much about singularity in terms of one-on-one connection. It's like what's good for everyone, right? And noticing when we had different things happen in our lives is interesting there. So that happened in Aquarius. Then in May, June, we had Mercury retrograde in Gemini. Gemini has to do definitely with the language, the words we use, wordsmithing, how we communicate, very specific kinds of Mercury. You know, Mercury rules Gemini. So they're very, you know, tuned into each other's archetype and work well together. When we had that Mercury retrograde, language was of utmost importance, and noticing the words we use and chose to use to describe our experiences, our reality, and how we shared amongst each other as well. What do we tend to, you know, say? What do we describe ourselves as, right? So I think that that's really important to just note that, you know, all of these Mercury retrogrades happened in air signs this year. Okay, and they will, I think, next year as well. We're looking at now this Mercury retrograde in Libra, and, you know, all of these air signs have to do with thoughts, ideas, but Libra specifically has to do with how we bring that inner idea out into the world and how it connects, how does it resonate with others? When you say something out loud and you're like, wow, I don't think anyone in the room understands what I'm talking about. You have to shift your language to your audience, right? All of a sudden, it matters how you're being perceived because you're in relationship with others. Now, that's not to say that you don't get to be who you want to be, but you have to understand that your actions and your words have meaning for others that you don't get to control, right? There's this balance of relational, connection. All right, Mercury retrograde homework. Okay, the prescription for Mercury retrograde in general is to do the RE words. You can pick your favorite. These are a few, it's like what, 7 of them. Review, remember, revolution, resolution, recreate, restore, rethink. When we're talking about Libra, definitely we're looking at restoring, reconnecting. Any of these words can really start to help us understand what maybe our aim for a Mercury retrograde cycle upgrade would be. Okay, again, I'm calling this an upgrade because I think it is. All right, so impact dates. 9/7, we entered the pre-shadow phase. You might have really felt that. I have friends and even myself, like shit started kind of going a little wonky and I was like, okay. It sometimes depends. Sometimes it's in our head. I'm sure there's a placebo effect and all of this other stuff, right? We definitely are self-fulfilling prophecyers, yeah? But what I will say is that when the Mercury enters the pre-shadow, Mercury starts to slow down because it's going to start going backwards. And we also go over, for this retrograde cycle, 15 degrees. So as soon as it hit, this Mercury hit 10 degrees of Libra on the wheel, and I'll show you that in a second. Actually, I'll show that to you now. As soon as it hit 10 degrees, so pretend this blue dot is the sun. As soon as it hit this 10 degrees of Libra, it's going to go forward and then it's going to go backward and then it's going to go forward again, right? So it's kind of windshield wipering over that part of the zodiacal wheel, and your chart has that placement in it. So you find out where that is, and that's called a transit. That's learning how to understand where a transit's going to, quote unquote, affect you. Now, I don't know that it would affect you as much as I see it as an opportunity to dig into that space and really dig in, especially with the air signs intellectually, and especially with Mercury, right? Lots of planets are in retrograde right now. We got Pluto, Saturn, Uranus, Jupiter, all still in retrograde until the end of October, some of them until November. And so right now we have a lot of things slowing down, right? Because we've been in a massive amount of shift and transit. And a lot of these planets go retrograde once a year for a few months, and Mercury does it 3 times a year-ish for about 6 weeks. Well, the whole cycle is about 6 weeks. The retrograde itself is 2.5 to 3 weeks. So when we look at tomorrow, right, or I guess Sunday, Mercury is going to station retrograde at 25 degrees of Libra. So, right, so it passed up that 10 degrees, right, past the 10 degrees. And when it gets here, which is where it almost is, it'll be there on Sunday, it's going to start backing up. Okay, it's going to go all the way back to 10 degrees of Libra when it, on the 18th, it's going to station direct. Now, stationing means it stops almost. It's like going to hang at 10 degrees of Libra for a few days, right? Mercury doesn't generally hang at degrees ever unless it's in that kind of shifting retrograde, right? So that's impactful. It's going to sit at that time. So if you are, or that degree, so if you look at the part of your chart, and again, the workbook really goes through it. We're gonna do a little examples so you can, kind of understand what this work looks like. And then it leaves the post shadow phase on the 3rd of November. So it'll leave the 26th or leave the 25th degree, move into the 26th degree of Libra on the 3rd of November. All right. So let's back up a little bit, zoom out a little bit. The signs in astrology, right? All of the zodiac signs, you probably know your sun sign at least, if not more. The signs are the how in the chart. So the how of Libra is the peacemaker, the diplomat. I balance is its key statement, right? The planets are the what in your chart. So Mercury is communication, mental health, so on and so forth. There are so many words that you could pull. The houses are the where in your chart. So when doing transit astrology, you want to look at what house is it happening for me in, right? So number 1, you're going to find Libra in your chart and find that house. And then you're going to understand that that house is dressed up in Libra's archetype. And there may be also planets in there that are in your natal chart. Okay, so we have natal chart planets, and then we have transiting planets. And right now we're talking about Mercury retrograding as a transit. Okay, so that does not change your natal chart. And that also means that if there are any planets between 10 degrees and 25 degrees of Libra in your natal chart, then you will have Mercury retrograding over those planets. And they'll meet up, they'll have a meeting. They'll have 3 meetings, right? Because it goes forward, backs it up, and then it goes forward again. So it's going to have a meeting 3 times. It's like, can I hear it again? What's the message again? Can I hear it again? So you might even have a need to go further with this work and find out what day Mercury is going to be hanging out with those planets in your chart. It can deepen that. And if you're in the lab, we're going to go over that in a class at the end of the month. If you want to just join just to do this work, you can do that too, and then opt out. It's all good. All right. So lots of people will send me their chart and they'll say, this is like, I love you, but you'll send me your chart and you'll say, I don't have any Libra in my chart, or I don't have any Virgo in my chart. And you're wrong. Everyone has Libra in their chart because you're an entire sky. You have all of the signs in your chart. You may not have any planetary placements, and Libra may also not be the beginning of any house for you. So some charts, the list ones that come from some of these websites, will actually not show Libra in your chart, but that's not your chart. A chart is a wheel. It has every sign. It has all the planets. So Libra is somewhere, right? We all have Libra in our chart. So even if you have 0 planets in your sign, in your natal chart, Libra still rules over a house, or 3 even in your chart. And therefore it totally influences a certain aspect of your life. All right, so let's look at some elemental patterns. You've seen this slide before when we were talking about where this transit's going to happen. Now, if you'll notice inside here, inside the middle here, we've actually got, this is the Mercury retrogrades for this year. So here was the one in Aquarius, right? Here's Mercury. This is Mercury's transit all year, right? It's going all this way. Now, here it is right now, just about to go retrograde, and then it's going to go forward again. So we were in the pre-shadow since September, now I can't remember the day, September 7th. Right. And so on the 26th, when it starts going backwards, it's going to move back. So you can see these are even houses. This is a whole house situation. This is not usually what a placidus chart for anyone will look like. But for all intents and purposes here, I put this one up. So let's just look at the elemental patterns. Whenever I see, oh, okay, well, we have all of the retrogrades for Mercury happening in air signs. Well, when else did that happen? That's an astrological inquiry that kind of gives us pattern, perhaps. So we're looking at the themes of changing ideals of equity, communication, and integration when we're talking about air signs. Okay. When we look at elemental patterns, the Mercury retrogrades happened in air signs in 2001, 2002, and 2003. They happened in 2008 and 2009. They happened in 2014 and 15, and then they'll happen 2020. They were partial. So they dipped back into air signs from the water signs. So they weren't completely in air signs, but they were partial. And the 2001, 2, and 3 were also that way. So 2021 completely in air signs, and 2022 I think may actually dip as well into earth signs and move back, because they're always rotating just a little bit, right? So we go through these kind of epochs of elemental Mercury retrogrades, and I just wanted to note that there are elemental patterns. All right, so let's kind of get into the thoughts of this. Okay, I wanted to look at a couple of charts to just express the teaching here before I took some questions. I have 3 charts, I think, and then a 4th. And I might lose a few of you. Please don't think anything. This is a multi-level situation. I think the biggest work that you can do with Mercury is make it personal. So this may speak to you and blow your mind. This may go right over your head. Just be present and let anything that you don't understand go. If you're in the lab, your Mercury Retrograde book is already on its way. If you've purchased it, it will be sent out tomorrow morning, and you can really start to dig in. And I'm happy to answer questions if anything feels unknown. I will also post this class so you can look at it again. But here's the thing, this just reminds me, by the way, I'm a big Star Wars fan, so I'm just like, this looks like, you know, the Sith and Yoda and Luke Skywalker like hanging out. But what's really happening, oh, something's falling. So this is the United States natal chart, okay? So I wanted to show you the United States natal chart because I think it's interesting. We're actually having Mercury retrograde right over this part of Libra. And it's in the 10th house for the United States. It's going to hit Juno and it's going to hit Saturn. And Juno is opposite of Chiron. Now, let me just tell you a few things about these few planets. Saturn is the Lord of time. It represents constraint, karmic debts. There is a huge amount of structural patriarchy associated with Saturn as an archetype. Saturn is the return that we have when we're about 30. It's about maturity and adulting, right? I mean, it's very much like, hey, you signed up for Earth School and I'm here to check your work. Like, what have you gotten done? How have you organized your life? What foundations have you built? It's very much foundational containering, right? Can you pay your bills every month? Right? Are you able to, you know, have some kind of structure, right? What kind of structure do you have? Now, I will say that, you know, Saturn doesn't give a fuck. Like if Saturn's in Aquarius, like you're going to have some weird structural habits, right? There might be some weird Winchester Mansion shit going on with you, and that's okay. The fact is that where Saturn sits in your chart is going to say a little bit about how you build structures, and that's okay. When we look at Saturn in Libra, this is the hallmark of a democracy, okay? Building the structure for justice, for equity, for equality, right? For balance and harmony, a melting pot, if you will, right? This is personal relationships. What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, and then we have together. And this one-on-one relationship, it's very interesting that Saturn is in Libra in and of itself in the United States natal chart. It just tells us a lot about what is our debt to pay, our karmic debt. Not to say that we did everything on the up and up. Remember, we wrote, and I say we very loosely, but the US wrote its constitution knowing that there were still enslaved people, and there were still women and enslaved people who were seen as secondary and or property, right? So this is a very, very karmic debt, right? And we are going to be looking at this. And every time we, you know, when we look at, that's why those elemental patterns came in for me. I was like, oh, the US has got it in the 10th house, which is all about the patriarchy, structure, tradition, right? That's the way it's always been, is the saying of a very stuck energy in the 10th house. And the Saturn part of it's like, there's this karmic debt. Well, yeah, you built something, you built a foundation of democracy on the backs of others who didn't get to enjoy it. Now that's me putting that in there, but this is very interesting, right? Then we've got Juno. So Juno was, essentially she's Hera, which is Zeus's wife. Now, Hera and Juno are synonymous, right? Juno is the merging. She's wants to merge. She wants to be, you know, the merging of two people. It's very Libran energy. And when we look at, you know, from the one or from the many, one, right? E pluribus unum. This is very much like her kind of deal. And the fact that she's in Libra in the US natal chart, it's 100% like super activated in this justice. It is the Statue of Liberty, feels like in my mind. You can disagree, that's cool. But so when we look at across the way, we've got Chiron and Aries in the US chart. Well, Chiron happens to be returning to Aries, right? Chiron is in Aries right now, not quite at the same degree that Chiron is in the chart. So it's coming, okay? The last time the US had a Chiron return, the Civil Rights Act was signed. We had massive amounts of uprising in regards to Jim Crow laws, and we had to eradicate, all of the, at least on paper, all the racism that had been building the country up until then, including women's rights, and through that transit, through the end of that transit, and as Chiron moved into Taurus for the US, women were able to get much easier to get birth control, have body autonomy, some of those things that Taurus brings in. Okay, in the 70s, women first started to be able to get credit cards in the US, okay, have their own mortgages, whatever. All right, so when we look at the oppositions, there's perspective going on here, there's an opposite. So when we have Mercury transiting over here for this retrograde, all of these things are going to come up. All of these themes are going to come up. The tradition of, well, this is the way that it's always been, just hammering, hammering, hammering. So if you are somebody who's an activist and has access to the justice system and is seeing the ways in which we can divest from broken systems and restructure, this is a great time for rethinking some of the structures that we have, especially in the United States. And it's going to heal us. That's the thing with Chiron involved. That's part of our healing process. It's part of the healing process. All right. So here is, I pulled a couple of charts. I wanted to look at the pandemic, and I had told people on Instagram, and I was like, let's take a look. I wanted to look at the Washington State home order. I'm in Washington State. The whole West Coast kind of had the home order at the same time. Ours in Washington happened. I was able to actually get a date and a time. So I drew a chart for the Washington State stay-at-home order on March 23rd of 2020, and coming from Olympia. Now, it was interesting to me that here's Juno again. Here's Juno again in Libra on that day. Now, let me just, okay, so this is 2020, okay? Juno just happens to be in Libra. And here's 1776, where Juno is in Libra. And so I was like, well, that's an interesting coincidence. We'll call it a coincidence. So I'm looking more into what that means. What is Juno up to? Juno's quincunx to Neptune in Pisces. And so this is what's going to get activated, right? As as Mercury moves over this section here and hits Juno, it's going to activate this aspect. And a quincunx is like an uncomfortable silence in a conversation that maybe was started by somebody just to stir the pot, right? Quincunx is, it's like, yeah, it's relational, but it's like, oh, maybe I overstepped. Maybe that was TMI. Maybe that was, I'm very good at quincunxes. So it's one of those aspects that stretches us. Okay, it's asking us to kind of like, just crane your neck a little further, look a little around that corner. It's not going to be as hard as a square. It's not going to be like unable to be seen, but it does have that strain. It's not easily working together. Now with Neptune and Pisces in the 7th house, this is that spiritual awareness, right? The spiritual dreams of our future within. And so when we're looking at religious freedoms, when we're looking at mental health, and we're looking at relating to each other, how do we transcend, right? Pisces wants to transcend the ego, dissolve things that make us so particular that we can't understand each other's experience. And so as Neptune's been in Pisces, there's been a lot of delusion about my reality being the truth, right? Like it's that confirmation bias that happens in our brains, and it's subconscious, and we don't know because we're like fish in water, and you don't know what you don't know. And so once you see it or are learning from it, there's a sense of openness that comes if you're open to receive. And with Mercury moving through this part, it just feels like there may be, hopefully, this is me wishful thinking, but there may be some ways in which we can kind of transcend, because we're seeing ourselves as a collective a little bit more. With Juno in the mix, it's like Juno wants us to be one. It wants, wants the merging. It doesn't want to be there to be the separateness, or say, I insist on my needs only, right? It's like, I can see you. I see you. I see your heart. And so while you may fuck up, I'm going to treat you with equity and respect, because that's a value of mine, right? Libra is ruled by Venus. When Juno's in Libra, she's washed in Venus's kind of ethos. In the second house, especially in this chart, it's just really calling in understanding the compassion that's needed in order to allow for body autonomy, for people to do what they believe is true. And then also to understand that there is a complex, polarity between what's inside and what's reflected outside. And you just have to work that through all of the time, and it's work. And Mercury is going to be here to help us parse out our thoughts, I think, in Washington a little bit. Now, again, these are public charts. They're kind of group charts, if you will. Okay. The United States is that's going to have some impact on you, right? This one, if you live in Washington, may have some impact on you. This chart was set in motion as a birth chart when we had that stay-at-home order, right? Which in some degree is still at play. People are not just freely doing whatever they want. There's still some hesitancy, and there's definitely some mandates as far as masks go. All right. Moving right along, this is the coronavirus, the coronavirus birth chart, okay, from Wuhan, China, 12/30/19. This is the best information I could find, was that the first case was found 5:43 p.m. We're going to just call that accurate information. It could definitely change. Now, you'll notice this chart looks a little bit different. I wanted to show this with the transiting planets. So if you're familiar with a natal chart, here is now the natal chart planet placements. Here's all of the zodiac signs. Oh, sorry, I was on another part of. So here is here's the natal chart planets. Okay, these are all the planets. For instance, here's this circle with the circle inside. That's the sun sign. So the Wuhan, the coronavirus has its sun at Capricorn. It's a Capricorn, you guys. I love you, Capricorns. I was raised by Capricorns. Structural foundation in the 6th house and service. It's interesting that its sun sign is in service, in the house of service and health. In and of itself, it's also got Jupiter in 6th house, Mercury, and Pallas Athena all in. So strategically traveling, right? Pallas Athena in Sagittarius. I really want to do, we're going to do rabbit hole astrology this month, and we're going to do it on this fucking chart, because coronavirus birth chart is like a whole situation for me. I went down a massive rabbit hole the other night. Okay, so but back to Mercury retrograde. So all of these out here, you may know if you're in the lab, these are the symbols of the zodiac signs. You may also be, studying yourself. And then we've also got the transiting planets out here in green. Okay, so this is where all the planets are right now. I think when I pulled the chart, so yesterday, which is, the moon will have moved for sure. The moon's not in Gemini anymore, I don't think. Although it might be at the end of Gemini. Not important in this moment, because what I want to talk about is the fact that we've got Saturn here in the 8th house. And when Saturn moved back into, started going retrograde, and Jupiter moved back into Aquarius from having gone forward into Pisces, is when we had the second set of lockdowns for the coronavirus. Now, it happens to be in the 8th house. The 8th house is shared resources, right? So we're seeing that pull back again, and the growth in shared spaces. It's like we can't necessarily go in big places right now, right? because that's where it's going to grow. Jupiter shows us this. It's like in the 8th house. When Mercury is going to retrograde here, where are we? So Mercury is going to retrograde right here. And here, of course, is Juno again. Now, Juno doesn't move very fast, okay? So Juno, of course, is involved in both this chart and the chart in March for Washington, because Juno was in Libra when the coronavirus began, and it continued to be there. This was like the thing that connected it. I don't know what kind of rabbit hole that is. I just think that it's interesting that it has to do with merging, you know, the partnership. It's very much how we see ourselves and how we see each other, how we relate to each other. What is it that we, you know, lend compassion to and have a capacity for love with, right? How do we do relational stuff when we want what we want, right? Everybody wants to do what they want, but how do you actually do something for mutual benefit? I think that's interesting. So in the coronavirus, Mercury will be retrograding in the 4th house. Now, the 4th house has to do with the home, it has to do with family of origin. And of course, we're working towards the holiday season. I think a lot of people are going to have to make some decisions about what those holidays look like, but also, you know, noticing it's a, you know, it's the house of pruning and weeding. It's like, what do we want? What do we want to keep and what do we want to let go of? So there's definitely going to be some spring cleaning. You might have to go back to a pod and decide, like, who do I want to relate to in regards to the coronavirus, right? Who do I want to create that pod with? Because there's still a lot going on. Pluto transiting here is not moving from the 7th house. So it's definitely, you know, about changing the structures of our shared spaces. Saturn and Jupiter are also doing that, this whole bar right here as it moves through. I think it's very interesting. It's not, you know, it's like, it could just have easily had a chart where, you know, these planets were down here, because these could have flipped. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. And so I just think it's interesting that it's in that house of relationships and the house of shared resources, you know, those structural large planets that are collected. And here we have Lilith and Ceres over in Gemini. Now the North Node is in Gemini as well. We've got that in the 12th house, 11th house. Again, this is shadow work. This is collective work. And then we've got Venus in the 5th house. You know, Venus in the 5th house right now with in Scorpio, it's like people want to get back on Tinder and like start dating again. And they're like so fucking done, you know, and they want to get out again. And so this is definitely pulling people out. Now let's look at Juno transiting. Okay, so Juno transiting right now has moved since she was here. So she's going to be in a sextile to herself from this chart in just a month or so. And I have a feeling that there may be some actual higher wisdom or growth of data coming in that we're going to be able to really trust new data coming in the next coming months. Let's hope. I would love that. It's fun. Okay, so here's a if you take nothing from this class other than on October 9th, 2021, okay, I think it's like what day is it? I feel like it's a Wednesday. It's not, it's a Saturday. Okay, Saturday, October 9th, 2021. The sun will conjunct Mars and Mercury retrograde. Okay, this is this party here. This is a little party. Okay, and it's going to be trine to Jupiter retrograde. All right, by just a couple degree orb. We're looking at, this is a massive download day. So you will be well served to just mark that on your calendar. Notice what you notice that day. Allow yourself to say yes to something. There's something powerful coming through. And so I hope that that's true for you. I think, and I'd love to hear feedback, how that day goes for you. I think it's a super fucking sweet day. There, like I said, there's always a date in the middle of the retrograde, the very middle of Mercury retrograde, where the sun is conjunct Mercury retrograde. Right now, the Mars happens to also be within a 1 degree orb of that transit day. So it's pretty cool. And Mars is the planet of assertiveness and championship and winning and productivity. It's also war and, you know, crazy shit, but let's hope that cooler heads prevail during this Mercury retrograde in Libra, which I think will be true. I think that will be true. All right, questions, thoughts? I'm going to look to the chat. If you want to get your retro upgrade, it's only $11 through the weekend. It's an 11-page workbook. You've got to do the work. You look at all the things, and it's $11 through the weekend. If you're already in the lab, you're going to get that for free. It'll come with your downloads this weekend. So no worries. If you already purchased it, you're going to be able to download that tomorrow when the email comes. If you don't see it, message me. All right. I don't see any questions in the chat. Does anybody have any questions? You can say them, you can chat them, you know, you can ask, you know, we have about 10 minutes. So I can take a couple of very specific questions if you know where it is in your chart. I can't look at your chart because I don't have any way of like seeing that. But if you know what house it's in, I'm getting in on the lab right away. This lit me right up. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm lit up. I don't know if you can tell. I get flushed when I'm super excited like this because I love astrology and I love what it can do for our internal process. Does anybody else have thoughts, questions, concerns? So MJ says, so the last time Mercury was retrograde in Libra was 1776. No, thank you. No. So we had a Mercury in Mercury retrograde in air signs, which includes Libra, all of these years. So 2021, or I'm sorry, 2001, 2, 3, 2008 and 9, 2014, 15, 2020, 2021, and 2022. So they're often, right? So there's 4 elements, right? Earth, air, fire, water, and the Mercury retrograde tends to oscillate. It's almost like this is a gear and it turns like a little bit each time. So we're going to have air sign ones, and then it's going to move, and we're going to have earth sign ones, and then it's going to move, and we're going to have earth sign ones that are moving into fire, and then we're going to have fire sign ones. So they kind of go and this 3 kind of pattern just kind of shifts a little bit each year, right? So you'll notice from 2003 to 8 was when it moved from it goes to earth, fire, and then water, and then comes back to air again, right, in their retrograde. So there is regular patterns. What happened in 1776 and what's happening in the United States chart, as well as the coronavirus chart, is Juno. So like there was this connection that I saw, and I kind of hyper focused on it. Like I said, there's other stuff there, but I felt like Juno was an archetype that really exemplifies what we actually stand for in the United States. So the fact that Juno is in Libra, this balanced harmony, mutually beneficial sign, right? It's about connection to each other. It's about the one and the many, right? Libra has the balance between the within and without. It's like, who am I in a relationship? It's relatable, right? And it's negotiable. It's the diplomat. And the peacemaker too, right? When we look at how we go and try and make peace with war all around the world, I think that Juno in the 10th house in Libra is kind of involved, right? It's kind of interesting. Saturn definitely there too. Yeah, okay. And again, you know, so Juno is in Libra in the coronavirus chart as well. So just curious about that, how that kind of comes down, right? All 3 of those charts have that. Okay. Katie says, I love being in the lab. Oh, thank you. And I absolutely love that you looked up the natal charts for coronavirus and the Washington shutdown. I literally, like, I want to do the rabbit hole astrology on it, because I just think it's interesting. If we read, you know, these events, like people, like what is its aim? And when I saw, you know, of course we knew in that time that there's so much going on in Capricorn in 2020, right? And it's definitely about restructuring the patriarchy and capitalism and all of the traditional ways that we've built society, the Industrial Revolution, and matured as humans, right? Which is what Capricorn, Saturn, Pluto, all are involved in, that maturation of civilization. But to look at it from that perspective of like, oh, coronavirus, it's like a thing, a person, whatever, an entity. I just, it delighted me. I highly recommend that you look at maybe other events like that. You can look at your marriage. You can look at your job. You can look at other charts, right? If you know the timing where you said yes to something or began something, that can be something too, where it's like, oh, I'm interested to understand where Mercury is retrograding for this part of my life. You can draw a chart for that piece and do that, right? I pulled one up for my marriage. My husband and I are going through a really incredible connection time. And, you know, it's in my, you know, so I drew up a chart, and I'm going to study that for Mercury retrograde, as well as myself, right? Because that's a big key pivot point for me. So there's so many ways to work with this stuff. And I think it all ends up being pretty healing. Again, you can join the lab if you want and get this workbook along with a ton of other stuff. But this month, I decided not to do an asteroid. What's crazy is that I started the workbook for Juno, which is the goddess asteroid. Like I said, she was in Libra for these charts that I pulled. And she's very Libra Scorpio, okay, rulership. But she's, you know, kind of a modern piece of astrology. And so instead I was like, well, let's focus on Mercury retrograde. And then of course, through researching and doing this class, recognizing that Juno's involved in, you know, these charts that I happen to pull. So I was like, oh, interesting. But Juno will come through, right? So we'll probably do Juno in Scorpio season, which I'm really excited about. Emily says, Jupiter and Pisces interactions during all the spikes in this pandemic, comparable to 1918 pandemic. So fascinating. Yes. So Spanish flu, that would be a whole nother, yes. So much. I think when we look at these patterns, the other thing that I was looking at is, Pisces and Neptune, or Neptune and Pisces. There's also echoes there. And it's just a really interesting, there's just echoes. There's just lots of echoes. So yeah, Emily, if you've done more research about that and wanted to share, if you're in the lab, that would be awesome to have you part of that conversation. We're going to do another class at the end of the month. So we're focusing on this though. Like I'm literally like, I have them, you know, there's Venus material because Venus rules Libra. There's Venus material in the lab, but what I really wanted us all to was to do this Mercury retrograde work and really test it out, right? All of the lab is really about testing data, gathering, patterning. You know, we're looking at the echoes, we're looking at different patterns in our lives. And so I'm hoping that I can inspire all of the members to do this work and really feed back to each other, like how they experienced it. And is it true? Again, like we come back to the fact that, you know, we all have everything in our chart. We're always doing the work of the cosmos, right? Maybe. And is it true, right? One of the things that I often ask is, you know, okay, so this placement for you says this about you according to astrology. And is that true? How is that true? How is it not true? And sometimes through that process, we can recognize, at least, and I have in myself, ways in which my experiences have interrupted my nature, right? It's nurture versus nature. When I see myself clearly, sometimes it feels really good to go back to that nature. And sometimes it feels very good to give myself permission to understand that there's been progressions that shifted me. And now I relate to that placement a little differently in my chart, if that makes sense. So thank you for being here today. If there's any other comments, please put them in the chat. We got just a couple of minutes. This class will be available in the video archive as well as on my website so that you can watch it if you want to, alongside of the workbook. Again, the workbook's only $11 through the end of the weekend. It's downloadable right now. I uploaded it just now. So if anybody pre-ordered it, it's going to come in the morning automatically tomorrow morning. But if you're on Instagram and you want it right away, I can send that to you directly if you're feeling impatient. But it's my son's 17th birthday, so I am going to be a little busy tonight. So hopefully it's not your whole Friday plan, but if it is, you let me know and I'll send it to you. Oh, I'm excited, Emily, to have you in the lab. If you want to reach out and ask any other questions, please reach out to me. Instagram is a great place. I hang out there a lot. And I will talk to you all very soon. Thank you. Thank you, Gretchen. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Dolores and Sarah and Sherry. It's good to see you all. Take care.